Hey guys, we're here today in Valheim, taking a look at the new armor set that Iron Gate Studios added, the root armor that you acquire in the swamp. And we are specifically taking a look at root armor's effectiveness while we explore the plains. Now the reason we're only taking a look at the plains is because I feel the other biomes are fairly obvious. You acquire root armor during the Iron Age in the swamp, and I feel like root armor is definitely the go-to gear while we are exploring it. Given that many players like myself like to explore the swamp in troll armor for the speed and forego iron armor as it is, the armor drop from iron to root is not that big a deal. Root armor still maintains pretty high speed, although it's not quite as much as troll armor, and the added poison resistance is phenomenal for the swamps. The big downside of root armor would be the fire resistance drop, which is not a big factor here since you are almost always wet while in the swamp, and Surtlings don't pose much of a threat. As we move on to the Silver Age and the mountains, I feel like root armor doesn't have a place at all. Our movement speed doesn't matter much in this biome, since you are unlikely to outrun wolves, at least not for a long time, and at one point or another you are going to take some big hits. I am a big fan of the wolf and silver armor while exploring the mountains, due to its increase in defense. In my experience, fighting things like wolves and stone golems or Finring rely a lot more on your timing and parrying skills, as opposed to your kiting skills. There's one bonus that root armor has in the mountains, and that is the increase to your bow skill in order to take down drakes. But if you have some frost resistance and are using potions, then these guys don't actually hit that hard, and if your aim's good with a bow, they don't take a very good hit. Which brings us down to the Plains biome, or the Black Metal Age. Everything in this zone hits incredibly hard and poses a great threat. The difference in armor class from root armor to padded armor is fairly massive, and that's why we're going to have this look at it today. Now, a few things that I want to clarify before we jump into it. The first one is minor, but it has to do with the bow skill increase from the root armor. It is unlikely that you're at 100 bow skill, but if you are, the bonus does not surpass 100, meaning you get no additional damage or firing speed by being at 100 and equipping root armor. The second important thing to know with root armor is that the mask for it gives poison resistance, and this poison resistance does stack with poison resistance mead. Stacking these two items together can be incredibly powerful, and almost nullify all poison damage on your character. And the third thing to be aware of is each piece of the root armor has a weakness to fire. This weakness to fire does not stack. If you are wearing one piece of root armor, you are equally weak to it as you are if you're wearing 2 or 3 pieces of root armor, provided your armor class is at the same level. Additionally, the fire resistance can be overcome with fire resistance potions, obviously not giving you as good results if you didn't have the weakness on, but it can offset this negative and still keep the armor viable if you happen to stumble across fire creatures. Now, I ran through a bunch of tests against the various plains creatures, being growths, fueling shamans, fueling spearmen, and death skeetos, to check out how the root armor fares against the poison, the fire, and the piercing attacks in the zone. All of these numbers are approximated and just rough estimates of the damage that you will take in a given setup. We will jump through it in different categories, starting off with the poison damage. For starters, we have the growth damage the character without any armor on, except a linen cloak. That way we don't have to be looking at a mostly naked Viking the whole time. The impact damage from the growth shots was dealing about 42 damage per hit. Now the growths fire a chain of hits, so this obviously is going to go up to a much higher number if you get hit by multiple shots in a row. The lingering poison damage left from the growth lasted 18 seconds and was dealing roughly 3 damage per tick, which comes out to a total of 54 poison damage over that duration. When your character is equipped in a full set of root armor, the impact damage from the growth was about 28 damage per hit, but it did drop the poison down to only a 10-second duration with a 1.6 damage per tick, totaling out to 16 damage overall. That's a massive drop in the poison damage overall, and it did pretty good against the impact damage due to its slight armor class. When we equip padded armor on, we only take 12 damage per impact, and the armor class from the padded armor without the poison resistance matches up with the root and drops it down to 10 seconds of duration and 1.6 per tick, allowing it to even out with the poison resistance and do a total of 16 damage over that duration, clearly giving padded armor an advantage over root armor against the growth monsters. Now, if we mix 2 pieces of padded armor, being the breastplate and the leggings, with the root armor mask, which has the poison resistance, the impact damage from the growth was also 12 damage, but the poison duration drops to 8 seconds, with the damage being only 1, totaling out to 8 poison damage overall, which is half of what the padded armor took. So if you're looking for the maximum defense against a growth monster, putting on that root mask with the padded armor's armor class can really get you good results and get that poison damage incredibly low. I also ran all these armor sets through with poison resistance mead on, You can see that the poison resistance mead did not have a big effect on the impact damage for no armor, but it did greatly affect the poison damage over time. When we did it with the root armor, we lowered the impact damage slightly, but we almost halved the poison damage that we take. When we did poison resistance mead with a full set of padded, it dropped the impact damage to about 7 or 8 damage per hit, and it massively dropped the poison damage to a 5-second duration and a 0.6 damage per tick, totaling out to only 3 damage total, which nearly negates it entirely. When we did the poison resistance mead with the root armor mask, the padded breastplate, and the padded legs, the impact damage was around 9 damage, fairly close to the padded armor, and the poison lasted about 5 seconds, with around 0.6 to 0.7 damage per tick, which comes out to 3 or 3.5 damage total. So if you are going to run poison resistance mead, you can probably forego the mask for the root armor and take that extra armor class for the other enemies in the zone, and perform just as well against the growth monsters. I think the interesting thing about it is it seems that there's diminishing returns and a cap on poison resistance, and through all my testing it didn't seem that you can really lower the damage below 3 damage total, or below 0.5 damage per tick, and it seems that the lowest they can hit is around these numbers. Even while equipping fully upgraded root armor or padded armor and doing the same test, we could not get lower than these poison numbers. So if you're already running with poison resistant mead and padded armor, then using the mask as well is not needed or a necessary addition. Now we can go and move on to the fire resistance category. We did the same thing, taking damage from a fooling shaman with no armor on, and we were taking 25 damage per tick, and as you're probably already aware of, burning always lasts 5 seconds, which means we were taking 125 damage overall from the fooling shaman. When we equip all root armor on, that damage went up slightly to about 28 damage on average, which translates into 140 damage overall from the burn, which shows us that the armor class from the root armor, at least at level 1, cannot counter its weakness to fire, and is actually worse than wearing no armor at all. If we throw on a full set of padded armor, we take only 8 damage per tick, which translates to 40 damage overall, massively reducing the fire damage we take from these shaman. And if we throw on one piece of root armor with any 2 pieces of padded armor, we take 18 damage per tick for a total of 90 damage overall, which can be fairly detrimental to your health if you get hit by one of these shots. Just like poison, we ran the same test with the fire resistance mead, and it was able to drop no armor at all down to 12 damage per tick, totaling out to 60 damage overall, cutting the fire damage down by slightly more than half. If you're wearing root armor and you use fire resistance mead, you only take 8 damage per hit, dropping the overall damage down to 40 damage total, which is a huge improvement over what the root armor was before. This shows us that adding a little bit of fire resistance allows the armor class to kick in more than wearing no armor, and it gains an advantage in this area. If we wear padded armor with the fire resistance mead, we only take 3 damage per tick, and take 15 damage overall, bringing the fueling shaman's damage very low. And if we wear one piece of root armor with 2 pieces of padded, we take the exact same 3 damage every tick and 15 damage overall. Meaning that if you're going to use fire resistance mead to cover your weaknesses in this area, then you could wear one piece of root armor for its other bonuses and be in a pretty good position compared to wearing full padded armor. Given that full padded armor and wearing one piece of root armor came out as the same damages, it also indicates to me that this is about the minimum that the fueling shaman's fire attacks can hit on a character regardless of your resistances. They don't seem to be able to drop below 15 damage or 3 damage per tick, at least on a consistent basis. Now we can move on to the pierce resistance given by the root armor breastplate, and see how it fares against both Desquitos and the spear fueling. Just like the other tests, we'll check out every armor setup. We will not, however, be having any resistance beyond the breastplate, since no potion exists for piercing resistance. With no armor on at all, the Desquito was averaging about 82 damage per hit on our character, which just went to reassure me how dangerous these things are when you are ill-equipped. The fueling spearmen were hitting about 78 damage per hit against no armor, and then when we went with root armor, the pierce resistance and slight armor class from it dropped the Desquito down to about 17 damage per hit, and the fueling down to about 15 damage per hit. When we wear all padded armor, the Desquitos hit about 22 damage per hit, while the spearmen hit 20. Showing us that wearing full root armor, even with its weaker armor class, actually performs better against these piercing creatures with that resistance bonus. Now, if we mix the breastplate of the root armor with the padded helmet and the padded leggings, the Desquitos only hit about 7 damage per hit, and the spearmen hit about 6 damage per hit, giving us a massive bonus against these enemies if we put the right equipment on. Now the big key takeaway from the root armor is to notice that the leggings give no bonus at all and just a weakness to fire, but both the breastplate and the helmet give a bonus or a resistance to damage types. So you might be thinking you could mix the helmet to gain poison resistance and the breastplate for pierce and just wear padded leggings. You can see the numbers on the screen from the exact same test for this armor, and it performs very well against pierce and poison. It does, however, drop you to 110 damage taken from the Fueling Shaman's fire attack, which is something that you just cannot do in the plains, and will likely get you killed if you get hit by them. Not to mention that these tests do not include the torch-wielding Fueling, who have a much easier time hitting you, and will clearly deal some heavy damage with their fire. So I would not recommend taking 2 pieces of root, and I would only take 1 piece of root in any given situation. My overall recommendation would be to wear the root breastplate so you can drop the piercing damage down to their incredibly low numbers, wear a padded helmet, and padded legs. In order to save on as many materials as possible, I would forego poison resistance mead, which would still allow you to take pretty minimal damage from the growth creatures, especially considering you're trying to avoid every shot from them anyway due to the knockback. And then I would try to focus around using fire resistance potions, which would allow me to almost negate the fire damage from Fueling Shamans and the torch wielders, even though I'm using the root breastplate. I think this maximizes your overall defense in the plains, and is the better way to go in the long run. Hopefully this video and information was helpful to you and can help you create the build you're interested in running, and can give you some ideas on how root armor can be effective even in dangerous biomes like the plains. Maybe you can hop down in the comments and talk about your experience with the armor so far in the game and what you've learned about it and in what areas it can help other players. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.